communication, providing resupply to Vranje and other units operating in and around Kosovo.
The two Apache crewmen are believed to be the first NATO military casualties in the Kosovo conflict since the alliance operation began on March 24th. Another Apache went down on April 26th, also during a training mission. But those crewmen escaped without...
Here, however, have German troops fired a single offensive shot.
14 Bundeswehr Tornadoes are flying sorties over Yugoslavia for NATO. For the German government, it's a sign that the country has finally assumed a mature and responsible role in the military alliance. So helping Macedonia and Albania cope with refugees from Kosovo and carrying out reconnaissance missions with these unmanned drones.
Operations. The two major rail routes into Kosovo have been closed.
5-2's contact. Contact up front.
Call it a flying gas station, if you will. The KC-10 extender, the Air Force's premier refueling aircraft, plays a pivotal role in keeping NATO planes flying.
In a sustained air attack, air refueling is very important. We allow the bombers to reach their targets and then safely return home with the fuel they need.
Members of the 305th Air Mobility Wing from McGuire Air Force Base make a practice run in the KC-10. Their mission, top off the tanks of 4 A-10s in mid-air.
I show contact, you're loud and clear. Loud and clear also. Fuel's come.
The KC-10's boom operator controls refueling through a digital fly-by-wire system. Sitting in the rear of the plane, the operator can see the A-10 through a window. The KC-10 is almost as long as a football field and carries more than 59,000 gallons of fuel.
The job that we need to do is get the fuel off to the fighters so they got the legs to get into country, then refuel them as they're coming back out.
Fuel is pumped into the A-10s at a rate of 1,100 gallons per minute. All of this is done while flying about 200 miles per hour.
Okay, disconnect now. Outflow is complete. And receivers well clear.
We know that there is risk involved, and we focus on it, and we minimize that risk.
McGuire is one of only 2 bases in the United States assigned the KC-10. More than 400 McGuire airmen and women and 15 KC-10s are currently deployed in Europe to support NATO's air operations over Yugoslavia. For Science and Technology Week,
this is within a total of 31 bridges attacked throughout the area of operations. The two major rail routes into Kosovo have been closed. The two major road routes from Serbia into Kosovo have been closed also. Serb forces have proven particularly adept at using tunnels, natural camouflage, and buildings in villages to make it difficult to locate and attack, sometimes even impossible, because they might be in houses where we do not know if persons are still living there. However, this limits also their own mobility. Additionally, the uneven nature of their operational tempo appears to be grinding down morale. There are several reasons for that. No direct access to the individual target sites and better weather means that we are now making good progress in taking out Serb fielded forces. I can report to you that to date we have struck 8 important battalion brigade command posts. I'm talking Kosovo. We estimate that some 50% of ammunition storage in Kosovo has been destroyed. And we have struck more than 300 individual pieces of equipment, including tanks, artillery pieces, armored personnel, carriers and trucks. Some 200 of those, which are talking tanks and artillery. And an important indicator, we have achieved the vast majority of those strikes in the past 2 to 3 weeks. I have to admit, I did tell you the reason that combat effectiveness of formed units is to all intents and purposes eliminated at levels of damage of course, less than 100%. Perhaps at around 50% losses or even a little lower. At that stage, the forces concerned focus on survival rather than fight of Serb forces in Kosovo. We are prepared to take them all out. What do all these statistics add bit by bit, faster and faster? Their ability to operate effectively, let alone carry out acts of brutality, is further reduced with each day.
Along Yugoslavia's border with Albania, rebels with the Kosovo Liberation Army fired mortars on what are said to be Serb positions. This is believed to be one of the first times the KLA has actually used heavy weaponry in its fight against Yugoslav military and paramilitary forces, and indicates advances in perhaps two areas. First, the KLA appears to be gaining at least a military foothold in some parts of the embattled province. But the KLA advances on the ground are thought to be as much or more the result of NATO airstrikes pinning down the Serbs than to any major improvement.
Slobodan Milosevic must begin pulling his army, police units, and paramilitary forces out of Kosovo. In addition, it calls for an immediate and verifiable end to the violence and repression in Kosovo. The withdrawal of Yugoslav forces is supposed to lead to a ceasefire. Only when the Serbian troops have left Kosovo will NATO agree to negotiate an end to the air campaign. No time plan for either the ceasefire or the withdrawal has been laid down so far. A further key goal in the peace plan is to guarantee the safe return of the ethnic Albanians to their homeland in Kosovo. Humanitarian organizations must also be allowed to operate normally inside Kosovo. The major sticking point in the peace plan is the deployment in Kosovo of an effective international security presence. This peacekeeping force would be authorized by the UN and operate under its mandate. Its duties will include ensuring that the Kosovo Liberation Army does not step into the power vacuum.
Guten Morgen, Männer. Rauchen in den Stuben verboten.
Smoking in the sleeping quarters is forbidden. If you smoke, ventilate. That's when you open a window. Remember that, it's comradeship. A reminder of the situation report in the briefing room at 1500 hours, following which the unit leaders go to the company commander.
The Germans have...
Family is extremely worried right now because they don't hear everything the way it really is through the media. They hear lots of horrible things and often nothing at all about how we're really doing here. Actually, we're not doing badly at all. We're not exposed to any kind of danger.
Are you angry with the media?
A little bit, yes. At first, it was pretty bad. We kept having to call home and tell our parents, calm down. It's not the way they're showing and telling it. Nothing's happening to us here. We're far away from the action. We have our own security. At first, it was pretty bad with the media.
The German-friendly acts, or even an attack from among Macedonia's civilian population. The duty roster doesn't leave much free time anyway. Bunks have been installed in every available space. The barracks have been enlarged with containers. The only luxury is the satellite dishes on top. The drone battery gets ready for action. It's the only unit which is still carrying out its intended mission, the monitoring of the situation inside Kosovo. The unmanned aircraft takes reconnaissance photos of the ground. This drone is christened Francis.
The name comes from the girlfriend of one of the guys here. We're going to take a picture of it and send it to his girlfriend back home.
The men have a great attachment to their drone. Frances and her sisters cost $1,350,000 apiece. They've flown almost 100 missions over Kosovo at a cost of over $40,000 a launch. Frances may look like a missile, but her mission is to observe, not to destroy. The drones bring back information about troop and refugee movements, as well as the effects of NATO's bombing. Francis is expected back soon from a 30-minute flight over Kosovo. These are always moments of suspense for the soldiers waiting. 2 drones have already been lost over Kosovo, But finally, she shows up. A bit late, but intact. The sophisticated electronics are well shielded against the impact of the landing. This time, in the middle of a farmer's field. The recovery causes a lot of damage to the land, but it can't be avoided. The Lieutenant Colonel settles the matter according to German law, with German currency.
According to NATO forces statutes, the Macedonians cover 25% of the damage that we cause. We repair, replace or compensate only 75%. But we were afraid that if that were the case, then given conditions here, they might do relatively little or nothing at all to help. So we made a proposal to the NATO Council that the 25% share of the damages from the Macedonian government be waived. And we'll pay 100%, so we'll have satisfied people here.
Here's a checkpoint. There's a checkpoint. Another checkpoint. 200 k's south of checkpoint. Several vehicles. With 3 buses here, and we're trying to do it the best we possibly can by helping the refugees. You can see the results, especially when new arrivals pass by. They laugh and wave. We were back at the school just a while ago. They were happy to get some school books and have the classrooms set up. That's our contribution, what little bit we can do. And we try to carry out the mission as well as possible. There's nothing more we can do anyway.
That little bit has saved the lives of countless ethnic Albanians driven out of Kosovo. And their gratitude is the reward for all the effort being met. The more the soldiers talk about being sent to Kosovo as combat troops against the Serbs. When they do so, their voices become thoughtful and subdued.
At the moment, we have just over a third of the contingent that was planned for Kosovo. The staff for the task forces is here, we have a rifle battalion here, and we have support groups here. The other soldiers who've been selected to take part in the mission to Kosovo, should a peace agreement be reached, are on 96-hour standby in Germany. All the material supplies are already in Greece and will, in all probability, soon be moved up to Macedonia.
Partly you repress it, and partly you have your own private thoughts on it that go through your mind at night when you're alone. But at the moment we have very clear instructions from our political leadership to implement and secure a peace agreement under the conditions they've set out. That's what I'm anticipating for the time being, and I'm not wasting time thinking about what might happen in this or that case. There are all sorts of possibilities for what might happen. You could probably brood on them forever.
I'm sure it wouldn't be a picnic. We have to be prepared for all possibilities. We're assuming there'll be a ceasefire or a peace agreement. And even if there is, then of course we'll have to deal with snipers and things like that. We have to get the soldiers ready for that. I think they're very well prepared. They're properly equipped and well trained, but it's an entirely different situation from before Rambouillet.
Ground troops in Kosovo? That'd be something. Do I feel a bit nervous? A little bit, yeah. We don't know what's going on up there. I think it might be like the first days of KFOR in Bosnia, when the troops were shot at or attacked by all kinds of people. That's not so great. Am I somewhat nervous?
This is the barracks area. It was attacked by 3 Harriers. The targets are clearly marked, 1, 2, and 3. And when we see the clip, I'd just like you to note where the targets are in relation to the overall barracks area. Okay, can I run the clip, please? This is the first one. The pilot's standing off at the moment, and you can make out the barracks very clearly indicated there. There's also a river here, which enables the pilot to orientate himself in the cockpit. At this stage, standing off some 5 or 6 miles, just to confirm that he's got the crosshairs on the right target. Now you see him closing in. Again, the river I mentioned earlier, much more distinctive. Maintaining the crosshairs position on the target all the way through. And as you can see from the explosion, a direct hit. And if you remember from the graphic, this is now looking at the barracks from what would have been the top of the slide. Much smaller, again standing off, but now closing in, again orientating himself, the river on the right-hand side of the screen, quite clear in the picture. Closing in and manoeuvring so he doesn't become a target himself. And again, another direct hit. And the final part of this clip shows the third Harrier closing again. This time we're looking at the bottom part, obviously the two other parts here. One totally destroyed as far as the barracks is concerned. What he's done now is go to black hot, which shows quite distinctively the barracks areas that he's aiming for. Bombs hit, another direct.
Thursday, April 22nd, the 5th week of NATO airstrikes. Besides targeting bridges and military and industrial sites, NATO's planes and cruise missiles started to attack what is termed command and control centers, such as the headquarters of the Serbian Socialist Party in Belgrade, and oil refineries were once more subject to heavy attacks. By the end of April,
has been used by the RAF on armour and concentration areas. This particular one, the BL-755, 147 different bomblets, and basically covers an area, when it splits open, spreads the bomblets out, about 150 metres by 75. Well, if
appalling damage inflicted by them.
You are not talking per se precision. The reason you have so many munitions is to cover as wide an area as possible, hopefully then getting as many targets within the oval of damage as possible. That's how the cluster bomb works.
But there they were seen hitting armoured vehicles, but when you hit a marketplace and a hospital and the centre of a city, you're going to cause widespread damage, aren't you?
Very much so. And I don't think they were aimed at these targets, but for some reason the pilot or pilots managed to not deliver them onto the airbase. There was comments earlier that perhaps NATO's running out of smart munitions, therefore they're using these. Well, no, a cluster bomb, if you're going after aircraft parked at the side of runways, they are the sort of weapon you would use. The question's got to be, of course, what altitude were they dropped from? Although you can drop them from very nearly any altitude, to get the most accuracy, you want to go as low as possible. So we do know NATO is still attacking from medium to high altitude. They have come lower over the past few days, but if they were dropping from, say, 8,000 feet, the margin of error is much greater.
How many of these mistakes do you think NATO can get away with?
Fewer and fewer. The rate of sorties, of course, has risen over the last 2 weeks as reinforcements have come in, and also the rate of civilian casualties has risen at the same time. And we do know that some European countries, the likes of Italy, Greece, Germany, are less and less happy with the civilian casualty rate. You've had NATO always saying they do not
A series of explosions, smoke rising from the centre of Niš. It came at a time when they thought it was relatively safe.
Began under a United Nations mandate and now includes troops from NATO and non-NATO countries, including Russia and the Ukraine. That's the model as the NATO allies and Russia try to work out significant differences.
Simulations of targets they will later bomb. Computer simulations like this based on actual satellite pictures. Meanwhile, the Pentagon says it is still getting reports of atrocities in Kosovo. More than 4,600 ethnic Albanians have allegedly been the victims of mass executions. And according to the Pentagon, there are now 2 confirmed mass grave sites and reports of 7 more. The Yugoslav Army, or VJ, is reportedly working to make it more hazardous.
They're not just glad to be free, they're lucky to be alive. The commanding general described what happened when their Jeep was ambushed.
The vehicle was hit by between 40 and 50 rounds. Between 15 and 20 Serb soldiers immediately surrounded the vehicle.
Outnumbered and outgunned, they surrendered. What happened next explains why in those first pictures they looked not just battered, but dazed and disconsolate.
One was struck so hard it broke the stock off the rifle he was struck with. They were kicked repeatedly in the face, the head, and the rest of their body. Several times they were threatened with rifles pointed at their heads, and their captors threatened at one point to cut their ears off.
In later pictures, they look better, but treatment remained brutal.
They were beaten, sometimes with batons. They were almost always hooded, forced to sleep in uncomfortable positions, either on the floor with their feet shackled or in a chair. When they moved, they were hit on their hands and their feet for moving from those positions.
Major General David Grange became visibly upset when he described their interrogation.
One example of an interrogation question that one of our soldiers received is, what is the address of your family back in the United States? When our soldier refused to answer, he was struck in the back of the head, with a baton, and then choked.
The 3 soldiers were decorated for their suffering, but the Army won't be handing out.
The Yugoslav capital came under the heaviest series of attacks since the start of NATO's bombing campaign. The embassy of the People's Republic of China set ablaze. Some 30 resident staff were initially reported to be trapped inside the building. The strike on the embassy may further complicate NATO's air war and the search for peace. China has strongly opposed the attacks on Yugoslavia and is sympathetic to Belgrade's negotiating stand over Kosovo.
It looks like somebody wants to stop China to accept discussions in Security Council next week about initiatives to stop war and to start negotiations.
Shortly after giving that interview, Lubisha Ristic was caught by another blast outside a hotel. He is deputy to the wife of President Slobodan Milosevic in the Yugoslav Party of the Left, the first ranking official to be seen injured by NATO strikes. Several hours of raids were aimed at a number of buildings, including the Hotel Yugoslavia, claimed by NATO to house an underground bunker complex used by the paramilitary leader and indicted war criminal Željko Ražnatović, better known as Arkan, who was visible during the air raids. NATO said it also targeted the army and police.
Wing Commander John Cook. This is his story.
The working day has barely begun before Wing Commander Cook takes the first of his many daily excursions around the Tirana airbase in his Land Rover. This is his turf, and he's a hands-on manager. On such a crowded airfield, safety is his watchword. Seeing 2 United Arab Emirates helicopters take off in a flurry of litter does not please him.
For a helicopter man, you know, plastic and rotor blades scare me to death, and therefore it's important that we try and alleviate that type of problem.
It's a topic that will surface again at the morning briefing for all the helicopter pilots flying aid. But before the reprimand, there's the weather report.
High pressure is building in through the Mediterranean, and it will push into our region through today and tomorrow.
There's also the latest intelligence from the landing zones.
There is no updated threat information to helicopter operations in northern Albania.
And then it's the Wing Commander's turn.
For those of you who deal with the humanitarian aid at the ground level, i.e. those maneuvering it around, unwrapping it, okay, can we please ensure that once you've unwrapped, that the wrapping is put somewhere secure, right? In particular, I'm talking about the heavy lift area and the French handling area. It is littered at the moment, and I consider it a flight safety hazard.
The briefing over, it's back in the Land Rover for another tour of the base.
Over on the right here is Shining Hope, which is an American-led initiative to take aid out into the countryside.
John Cook has instigated a traffic flow system on the airfield, which is so effective, even he can't circumvent the diligent US sergeant on the barrier.
Sergeant, I am the airfield manager. I know why you do it. I've asked you to be. If I can just get round there so I can get up the top end to do the work.
After that truck is done getting searched, you can go through. But the reason that we keep them out is because when the dog's being searched, trucks are not allowed in here.
All right.
All right, so next time I tell you to stay out, you need to stay out.
Thank you, Sarge. Can I now move on?
At any one time, there are close to 40 helicopters flying in and out of the base, and at the peak, there were around 100 cargo planes bringing in aid every day. Keeping a lid on it all can often be frustrating.
What is important? Right. Your vehicles being just here. Yeah. No vehicles on the hard standing. The UNHCR need this to turn round. That was the first agreement. We have made space for your vehicles, in the places like this. Yeah. Okay? They've got to be moved. I'm sorry. All right? And there was no ISO containers to go on the hard standing here. You are just restricting their space and movement.
Whilst John Cook troubleshoots out on the base, his small helicopter task force continues to plan for the days ahead, flying aid to the camps, many of which, as was pointed out to me in the aircrew briefing room, are within shelling distance of the Kosovo border.
As you can see,